Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Jerri Walker and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And last week we began a conversation about grief and loss and change and how it relates to this pandemic and COVID that we have all been going through and all the changes that we were asked to make so that we could be safe. But today, we're going to talk about grief and bereavement as it relates to the process that we go through when we lose someone that we have loved due to death. So, just to recap, do you remember about the stages that we talked about? We talked about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and how she had presented to us stages kind of as a blueprint that we go through, reminding us that this is not a linear process, but this goes around sometimes in circles, and in any given moment we may feel everything about those stages. We may have times of denial and anger and depression and anxiety and disorganization, all within the same hour, and that is really normal. And again, grief, by definition, is the normal process that we go through when we experience loss. And that applies also to the loss of a loved one. For the past 30 years, I have had the privilege of journeying beside those individuals, families, children that have had losses. And it has been a privilege. And one thing that I have recognized, and actually it's even talked about in most literature that you read about, that we don't do grief the same way. Everyone has their individual path that they take. Many times it has to do with the relationship that we have had with a person that is now gone. So it's okay if you know someone that you see as doing things so very differently and you don't understand what they're doing. It's okay, because none of us do it exactly the same way. If you are within the first year of the loss, you may already have had those moments where you go, I just can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that this person is gone. I wasn't ready for that. We have what is so many times called anticipatory grief, when we know someone is going to pass, maybe due to a very significant illness that they have had for years. We anticipate the loss, but even then, when it happens, it's as if it was sudden, because all of a sudden we have been caring for them and now they're not there. Or if it's a very sudden loss, that many times is called complicated grief, when we've had no time to prepare. And that sets us up to a whole different journey that actually can be much longer and much more profound. And at that time as well, when sudden loss enters our world, many times it is really important to get outside help to help us cope with the huge change and loss in our life. If you are in that first year, you may also be experiencing times of just profound depression and anxiety, wondering if you're going to make it. I have had said to me so many times that I just don't want to go on. Now, that can be really scary to hear and even scary to utter those words. Sometimes it is a call for help, and sometimes there is suicide ideation that is very serious. And it's always serious when we don't want to go on. However, in grief, those feelings sometimes are very normal, that we don't want to go on and live the life that we know is in front of us without the person that we love. Very normal. We may even have times of just pushing it all away. Sometimes grief is a luxury. If you have lost a parent and the other parent is dependent on you now totally, or you have children that also are dependent on you, and you're caught in what we call that sandwich generation. That can be exhausting. And the thought of really spending time in feeling that grief is just not there. And so you push it away. That's okay, because you know what? You're trying to survive, and some days it is just about survival. The one thing about grief, though, is because it is the normal process, is that we can pack it away and we can push it aside and we can put it up in the attic, but it eventually comes back and it finds us. And there is no time limit on this. I have had clients in my office that after 10 years discovered that much of what they were going through in their deep depression was the fact that they had never totally acknowledged the loss of their loved one. It has no time limit. So sometimes you have to take the time to care for those immediately in front of you in order to survive and to get through this. And that's okay, because there will be time. Also, there's another interesting thing that happens during that first year. At first, there is so much activity around the loss, especially if you are planning a memorial or a celebration of life, and you're caught up in all that requires, or you're having to get an estate all settled, or you're traveling, or people are coming in to see you, and there's just this steady parade of people at your front door bringing food or sending their wishes or just wanting to be present with you. And then it gets really quiet. That is the time so many of us go through that when it talks about depression, that can be the time when depression can really set in, because all of a sudden the silence is deafening. You've had all of this activity, you've been a caregiver, you have been on the front line, and now it's quiet. And it seems as though you don't know what to do, and you really don't want to go on. And there's another interesting thing that happens. Many times friends are on the outside looking in, but they're not real sure what to do. So not only have you experienced the loss of your loved one, and as life as you've known it, but the people that you have depended on being there aren't as accessible. They're there, but they aren't real sure what to do. And how many times have you heard, I know I've heard it, that, well, I didn't want to bring up the person's name to the grieving person because I didn't want to remind them. Well, you know, when loss happens in our lives, there's no reminding. It's there. That person, it's as if you put your fingers up over your face like this, at first, that's all you see. Your field of vision is all about that loss and that person, and they aren't there. Now, over time, the goal is that it moves out a bit and over so that you can see that your path continues. But at that first time, it is right here. So if you are a friend also that has had someone that has experienced a loss, make that call, email them, text them, check in on them, because every time you do that, you actually bring back to them that it matters to you that they are grieving. And the person that they are grieving, they matter to you too. So it's that opportunity to connect when we feel awkward and we don't know what to say. And let's face it, are there any really good words in the English language or in any language that we offer when someone is grieving so profoundly? There really isn't. What we do offer is our presence. And when we come alongside a person who is grieving, whether that is through email, whether that is through a phone call, or sending a card, it makes a difference because we just paid tribute to the person that they have lost. And what a difference it can make, just that one little thing. Also, not only during this first year of loss, there is a myriad of emotions, and we've talked about the depression and the anxiety. And so many times during that time, we want to just withdraw. We don't want to go out. We don't want to tell the story. But you know what? The most important thing that we can do is to tell the story. Again, tell their story. Maybe it is about the illness. Maybe it's about other times of their lives. Maybe it's your life together. Whatever it is, reminding others who they were, what you did together, the fun times that you've had. And let's face it, this first year, every day is a first. All of the holidays are a first. The anniversaries, the birthdays, they're all a first. Sometimes there is that desire because the pain is so real, so profound, that you just want to escape. And sometimes it's okay as long as you come back. And escaping, I mean, sometimes there's more substance abuse. Sometimes you find that you just want to get in the car and you just want to go and you just want to travel because you feel like if I somehow leave this place where it happened, it will feel different. But you know, grief kind of follows us. Escape is not an unusual thing, but if you find that certainly with any substances that it is too difficult to come back, that's a caution light to reach out and to find some help, because you don't want to continue down that path, because grief will follow and will find you. And mental health is about keeping that balance that we talked about last week, that equilibrium. And so at the beginning, as we said, sometimes that grief is so profound that we can't see around it. But as time happens, the goal is that more and more, if you can have those moments of remembering, and by that you may be journaling, you may just be sitting in your chair sobbing. You may not want to see anybody, and that is perfectly okay. But then there is that line drawn that you then engage into restorative activities, such as a hobby that you enjoy. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's working on something in the garage that you love to do, or tinkering in the yard, or planting some flowers in memory. Whatever it is that brings you out of that place is a good thing. And as we talked about last week, you develop a rhythm. Many times I'll have a person get their calendar and say, tell me when it is that you're going to connect with a friend this week. Tell me when it is that you're actually going to go and buy the things that you've needed to buy, and just get out and be in the world a little bit, so that you see when you glance at your week that you have things planned that take you out of your home. And I know right now it's very complicated. With the pandemic, we have entered into an unusual time that has complicated everyone's grief process, because not only are you dealing with the loss of a loved one, but the things that we typically recommend in terms of connection, it's been difficult to do because your safety is paramount. So it's figuring out now, how can you begin to move about your world a little bit more, knowing that this first year, you're living the first day every single day. You may be saying, but this isn't the first year, and this loss happened years ago, and I'm feeling really awful again, and I don't know what's going on. Am I losing my mind? No, actually, you're not losing your mind. When we have other losses enter our world, and let's face it, COVID is another loss that has entered our world, it taps into that place where we have experienced profound grief. And many of those feelings and thoughts and actions that we had when our loved one died, we revisit. And it causes that maybe depression again, or that feeling of disbelief. I just can't believe this is why did they have to leave? Questioning God again. It's okay to do all of that. Loss is an emotional, it's a physical, and it's a spiritual place that we enter when we say goodbye to a loved one. So revisiting that all again is not abnormal at all. In fact, it's all connected. And so just being aware of that is important during these times of still trying to stay safe due to the pandemic. What can you do during this first year, or any time actually? It is about connection. You've heard me say that before, but I can't say it enough. Being connected does remind us always that we are not alone. There are grief groups happening now again, and even some still online. I believe we here at the Cathedral of the Rockies have had Grief Share as a part of our recovery process through the grief process, and I encourage you to look up their website, because while we don't have a group going on right now here, there are many in the Treasure Valley that are currently going on. It's griefshare.org, and they show you where they're happening all across our valley here. So there is always one starting, and it's a 13-week program, and it's excellent. Why are groups so important during this process? Well, there's nothing like being in a room where everybody gets it. Because how many times have you said to yourself, well, I would talk to my friend, but they just don't seem to understand what I'm going through. Well, the grief groups, you're next to somebody who does understand. And it's a safe place where you can talk about your fears, the guilt, all that you are going through right now. It is a place to be and to find healing. So I encourage you to do that. Also reaching out to friends and calling the church. If you need to talk to one of our pastors, you're really angry at God and you'd like to have some understanding about that, please make that call. The most important thing is that you know that you are not alone. This first year will end. However, the grief goes on. It is as if the curtain is kind of pulled back over time as you begin to fully discover all the areas of loss that you now have. But time is our friend, especially if you're working through this process, keeping current with what you're feeling, taking those times to take a break and do something that gives you some joy, and then realizing that maybe you need to go back to the chair and just remember, it's all okay. It's the process, and it's your process. And no one else needs to do it your way. This is yours. And you may need to be the teacher to others in terms of what it's like for you to go through this so they know how to respond to you as well. I'm so glad that we had another time just to talk about grief. It's such a huge topic. And one of the things I do want to, before we end this time together, is to remind you that if the caution light has been on for a long time and almost turning to red, or maybe it is on red, that you are just stopped. You are so stuck in your grief process that you cannot see that life goes on, that truly you don't care if it does, or if you've developed some habits that you know are not going to be the path that you want to be on, and it's going to affect your physical health. Please call your physician, call a therapist, call the church, call my number, email me, let me know what you need. I can be a resource for you to take that next step toward healing. Again, knowing that you matter. Your story is sacred. The memories of the person who has just passed will live on through you, and you can create rituals to help celebrate their lives. I'm coming up on an anniversary of my mom's passing a few years back, and now on the 15th of June, all the girls in my family, well, in honor of our mother, we make pies. Well, I don't make a pie, I buy a pie because it needs to be edible. But we all do this together. And we talk to one another on that day, and we all share what kind of pie we're eating. And that is just one little way that we say, hey, Mom, you're living through us. We love you, and we miss you. And I encourage you to figure out what is it that you can do that makes a difference and brings that back, that you rejoice and celebrate the life that you have lost. Again, thank you for being here again tonight, and let us know how we can help. You do matter, and so does your mental health. Thank you.